Hiya, can everybody hear me okay through the mask? Yeah, cool, thank you. Sorry for the mask, I'm disabled, so I'm still having to be very careful. So the lovely folks at Skiller Whale have asked me to come here today and basically wax lyrical about how brilliant they are. I will caveat this with saying I have found they made such a difference to my organization. I've become an advisor for their firm, so this is definitely kind of fangirl territory. But I think they've done that because it was a genuinely useful case study, so hopefully you'll find it that useful as well. As Lee said, I'm Meri. I'm probably best known for being CTO at Monzo for a while, but I also run the Lead Dev Conference, so if you've got tech leads and engineering managers who need to level up, then we're running again in June this year, for the last time at the Barbican. But these days I'm at Pleo. Pleo's a Danish fintech. Basically makes expenses not shit, which weirdly is enough to build a multi-billion-dollar business on because expenses are shit. And I arrived at Pleo in November 2022, and they'd hired me a couple of months beforehand and then had to do a bunch of layoffs. So it was not the most auspicious timing to be the new CTO with a bunch of new ideas. And it was a little bit frightening because the culture at Pleo was really interesting. Very entrepreneurial, lots of engineers who'd been hired because they wanted to build great product, which is good. Very, very customer focused, customer obsessed, which was great. Used to being very autonomous. Completely unprepared for scale. And at the point I arrived there, 25,000 customers. We've now got 35,000 customers. So that scaling was happening very rapidly, whether we wanted it to or not. And the monolith that had been there since the beginning of the company 8 years previous was very much blocking autonomy. It was impossible to change something without messing with somebody else's area in some way, shape, or form. Those of you who've done scaling CTO roles before will know there's always a freaking monolith, and it's always blocking autonomy. So I know this is not a new situation to describe. And so came up with what is a fairly bog standard architectural strategy, right? Which was to move everything to being API first. So tell teams they needed to make it possible to interact with all their functionality through an API. They had to be able to expose those APIs not only internally but externally, so we could start to have third parties building more of our accounting system and HR system integrations and that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, most of these engineers, though very entrepreneurial, weren't used to building in this way. They kind of understood the concept, but hadn't got any actual experience doing so. And I have a personal philosophy that I think everybody wants to be good at their job. I don't think people wake up in the morning going, today I'm aiming for just south of mediocre, and if I can fuck up everybody else's day, then my day will be perfect. Like, okay, assholes exist, but they're not the majority of your team. And so I figure that people want to be great at what they do, and our job as leaders is to, enable that, figure out what's in the way of them being brilliant, and then make that change to help them be better. And so I had 200 engineers with variable understanding, quite varied experience, and the need to upskill very rapidly. And very obviously, nobody wanted me to send everyone on a week of classroom training, because nobody wants to do classroom training, and even fewer people want to do a webinar, right? So that was my first problem. My second problem was it was going to be expensive to upskill 200 engineers, but it was going to be a lot more expensive if I didn't do it. I had a very blunt, I'm South African, so we're kind of blunt as a feature rather than a bug, I think. 300 years of Dutch rule, 100 years of British rules, like very direct, mildly apologetic about it. And so I basically went to our CFO and went, I know this is going to cost us, but trust me, it's going to cost us so much fucking more if I don't fix it, and we keep building the way that we have been. It's fragile, things are falling over, customers are starting to notice. And one of the things that I think people are not really cognizant enough of in when we've got sometimes very good engineers is that everybody goes through this cycle when learning things, right? You start off unconsciously incompetent. You don't know how to drive, you don't even know what the controls do. You become consciously incompetent. You now know that you're fucking up. Like, learner driver, grinding the gears, forgetting to indicate, forgetting to check the mirrors, all of those kind of things. You become eventually consciously competent. Nobody pays more attention to driving than someone who's just got their license. They're putting all of their energy into getting it right. But then eventually you get to unconscious competence. I'm sure that many of you have traveled here today, driven to work on a day. I have no idea how to adapt this analogy for the London Tube, so please forgive me for that. But you get to a point where you probably don't even remember the journey. And you did everything right because nobody died. But you get to work and you don't really remember making all those micro choices about indicating and changing gears and changing lanes and whatever. And I think a lot of the time we have a problem in our teams because we get engineers who are at the point of being unconsciously competent. They're automatically doing the thing right. And then we ask them to train others and teach others when maybe they've never been taught how to teach. And somebody who's automatically getting it right, when you ask them, why did you make that choice? What made you structure it that way? They don't actually know. That decision happened so far in the back of their brain, they're not aware of it. So what do? They lie. And then it's not malicious, but nobody wants to go, my hindbrain told me to do it that way. Like, nobody's like, yeah, my architectural choice happened so far back in my brain that I don't actually know what the reason was. And so they lie. And it's really difficult to learn well from lies. So sometimes your most expert engineers are the least able to explain why they do what they do, and the least good at training and teaching the folks coming up behind them. This is separately, whole different talk, why we have to teach senior engineers and staff engineers how to be good teachers. But as I say, different talk, not going to go into it today. And so I went looking for a bunch of different options in terms of how to skill up this organization, how to do it in a way that they weren't going to hate me and quit, how to do it in a way that was actually going to be effective. And I found Skiller Whale. Actually, at one of these conferences previously was the first time I met them. And I chose them for a number of reasons. Their coaching is very experiential, so you're doing the actual work in a live setting. It's hands-on. There's lots of live coding exercises. There's a coding environment that they use that they use all through the training. It's diagnostic, so you do a test or an assessment ahead of time, so you don't have to sit through trainings that you already know the content, so you can skip those modules if you're already good at it. There was some interesting reactions to those diagnostic tests. Some people who thought that they knew all about APIs suddenly realizing that they maybe weren't quite as expert as they thought. And then finally, that all of their coaches are freelancers. They're real practitioners who are out day-to-day coding, and they're just spending some hours every week training these kind of sessions. And it went surprisingly well, really, really well. I have a fairly, I think, typical engineering org that is pessimistic to the bone. Is that the right way to describe it? They're not gushing about many things, but they gushed about this. They really, really liked how they were learning. Their scores in their confidence level in what they learned went up massively, very, very rapidly. And they really liked the real-life nature of it and the specifics of how the coaching was done. And yeah, you can see improved massively in terms of understanding. And so that led to this, which I appreciate is not the best design slide in the world, but it is my proof to my board that my investment was worth it. On the left side, you see all of our APIs that now exist. That's almost, so everything in green is already taking traffic. Blue is in development, and there's a few in gray there that aren't started yet. But that's pretty much the entire functionality of Pleo that a year ago was all in this dense Node.js monolith that The company had made a decision to move away from Node.js, but had not moved the monolith away. So I had a bunch of Kotlin engineers going, Node, every time they had to touch the monolith, which also didn't help. Throughput since November 22 has gone up 235%. The dips are Christmas, just so nobody's like, what the frick is wrong with that graph? And so we've more than doubled throughput as a result of making this change and doing this training. And cycle times improved by about 40%. So we've seen an organization go from liking the idea in theory, but having no freaking idea how to actually make it happen, to having made it happen, having seen the results, and now we're at a point where we've got our own engineers strong enough that they can coach each other, that they can help each other, and some of them have even learned how to teach from watching how these coaches do it. That is most of the story. What we're doing next, we're taking a bunch of our front-end folks who mainly were hired to build our web app, but now also need to build our mobile app in React Native through some specific React Native training. And then we've got a whole curriculum for our tech leads. And so like many of you, I think we're moving away from having an engineering manager in every team and moving towards having eng managers look after 8 to 12 people, and then having a tech lead in every team instead, who doesn't line manage, but leads the team from a technical perspective, partners with the product manager, partners with the designer, that kind of three amigos classic style of working. And that's the end of my story. And my favorite GIF of all time. If you haven't seen this movie, you have to watch it. It's hilarious. But anyway, thank you very much.